Hello everyone, this is Christian Mel at Xdone Interactive, and in this video we are going to be able to use JavaScript to replace our icons just as we could with the JavaScript available from Font Awesome itself. So in this case, if we put a tag in there with the appropriate IDs on it and retro, and so appropriate class names will tell us the icon and the scaling. So again, like I said, we could do this with Font Awesome itself, but in that case, quickly able to get it down to about 800 kilobytes worth of JavaScript to do that. But here, we will have just 10 kilobytes of JavaScript to accomplish that for ourselves. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing that we're going to do is to modify our HTML plug in this case and get rid of our mixin. We'll just create this div with an app or with ID app. Save that. Our camera will go away. And so the first thing into our icons.js file. So given a choice, 99% of the time I'm going to choose to deal with an enum versus strings. So I'm going to put in a function here. It's basically just going to take a string and camel case it, and we'll see why very shortly. So create a constant I called keyObjects, and that's the object.keys of the sprite.attributes, and we then map over those, spit out some objects. And those objects will have a class, which is sprite.attributes x1, which has a class on it. Give me an ID, which is the x, an enum, which will be to camel case, and last, viewbox. Attributes x dot viewbox. Console logs those key objects to take a look at what we have here. So, all right, so we have our objects being created. One property that would be nice to have on this thing is going to be a width. So let's create a width, and the way that we are going to create this width is by saying parse int, and we'll parse the sprite dot attributes x dot viewbox. So the viewbox is a string, so let's split that string on spaces, which means that the width will be the index 2 element. Put our radix in there. So divide that by 512 and multiply that by 16. If we save that, that then gives us a width of 16. So that's working correctly. We can shrink this down a bit, get rid of our console log statement, and as usual, get ready to print some stuff. So const, in this case, we'll take in OS. All right, down at the bottom here. So let me just put this part in to begin with. So what we're going to end up with is an output. Put a couple of comments at the top to deal with linting. We're going to output something we haven't created yet to a file that I called faicon.ts. So let's create the thing that we're outputting here. So const, we have an enum name, and that's just icons, and then we have const output enum. So we're outputting strings. We'll export an enum, and it'll have the enum name, of course. Put our parentheses there. All right, so now let's loop over our key objects and map x comma I and put those. So what we want is to have made that correctly. So x comma I, what do we want from in here? So we have, I think I called it end. So I less than key objects dot length -1. So if we still have objects to go, we'll put end of line. Else we will just do blank empty string. From there we will return a string with 4 spaces to start with, and x.enum comma comma and end. So now that's going to output an array of strings. So we will reduce, and we'll have a previous and a current, output of which would just be previous and current please, and we'll start with an empty string. Okay, so crossing our fingers that I managed to type everything right this time. Come in and take a look. We have our new file, so we have our icons. Just to be sure, let's come up here and bring in another one. There's another camera. Let's bring that in, save it, run it. So now we have 2 in our enum. So that's working correctly. Now this process that we're doing here, looping over the objects and using the end, pre-reducing, we're going to do this a few times here, 3 altogether. So let's just take all of that out. And I created a function which basically does the same looping. If you pass in a function that converts the key object to a string, which then means that our enum can then just be, instead of this mumbo jumbo, we put in this, save that, just to make sure, same deal. So all I'm doing is saying run my key objects to string, and the output will just be the enum value. All right, so I don't want to mess this one up. Next thing what we're going to do is create a map that goes between the enum and the key objects themselves. So let's do this. And so we have, well, it'll be easier to look at when we print it out here. So we're going to end up with an icon map, which then goes from enum to what I said the key objects were, right? And to do that, we just need our mapping for our function. So we have our function key objects to string, and the only thing that we need to pass into that then is a function which outputs a string. And it's easier if we just copy and paste. So if we look, we have our open and closing square brackets. That's so we have for our map element, it's going to be icon name dot the enum itself. Then we have the values from our attributes themselves, and we're going to output those. Output icon map, save that, run it, and if we look in here, so we have for each of our enums, we have the attributes values. And I think from that point we can start to use these a little bit here to see how to work them. So import from, and icons, what we have is the icon map and the enum. So let's create us a function which I called FASVG from icon. So if you give me the icon, the enum, and a scale, which is a number, which we will default to 1, we can do some stuff with it. That stuff is basically recreating that mix-in that we had in Pug, right? So we have the constant string values. We use our map to get the icon. Noticing the exclamation point to say that I know that it's in there. From it, we create the CSS class, we get the view box, and the href. So from there, we're free to say const app equals document dot get element by ID, called it app. Const div equals document dot create the element div dot inner HTML. That will be a SVG from G from icon, and the one that we're looking for would be icons. Let's do the camera. Give it 3 app.append child div. Perfect. It's not going to know what that is. App, because I forgot my exclamation point there. See, browser sync works after this. So we have our camera. We also have, well, let's just do this. Let's make it 10. Scale it to 10. And browser sync, why you know work. All right. Instead of 10, let's go to 8. There we go. And so now our icon, we're able to, given our app, we can, given an icon, scale, we can do basically what we were doing before with that mix-in. But of course, this is not what our goal was. So what we'll do is we're going to take this function. So now because there's these, the dollar signs, a few other things in here, I have to do some string escaping. So actually, let's just get rid of this stuff, save it in our icons. We'll come over here. I've already, of course, done the escaping from everything. And we just need to then output this thing. Guess I shouldn't have completely gotten rid of all of that. So if we save that, if we look, we now have our SVG icon, which means that we can do our replacing that we were doing before by just saying, give me that function from in there. I'll pass in the icon and the ID, save it, and our icon is back. Again, 10. All right. But of course, this was not our goal here. Let's get rid of that. The goal at the moment for this video is to be able to write in an I with the appropriate classes and have our icon appear. So let's go ahead and take care of doing that. Back in our icons file here, what we're going to do is to create another map. So this one is giving us from the enum to our key object. What we want now is to go from a string ID to an enum value. So const, I called it output ID map. And as I said, we're going to go from, it's going to be a map. So a map that goes from a string to our enum value, in this case, the icons. We'll come down here, and what I need is square bracket, or parenthesis, and semicolon. And we've already created our function, so let's come in. So key object, so to convert our key object to the map that we're looking for is X gives me an ID, the enum name, and then the enum value for each object. So let's output that. Save, run it, and here we are with our ID map. So again, goes from the ID to the enum. So back to main.ts. Let's bring in the map from ID and the get the SVG from the icon. We'll create another function, SVG replace. So you give me the document and a class that I should be looking for, which will default to FA. And we then do stuff with it. So we go to collection, and it's document dot get elements by class name, FA class. Perfect. We'll go for const element of collection. What we'll look for then is for const class name of element dot class list. Const icon, that's going to be FAID map, and get, and what are we getting? The class name. So now that may or may not exist, right? So what we'll say is if type of icon equals undefined, then we will continue. Else, what we'll do is then say const container, and the container is going to be document dot create element. We're going to create a span, and then I will say container dot inner HTML SVG from icon, and give me the icon there. And actually I forgot something, right? For container element dot class list dot for each. Give me those, and for now we'll just say container dot class list dot add the class. That's good. And then we'll say elements dot parent element, gotta be one of them, replace child container, we'll replace the element, leave it there, and element dot have a break in there, but why the break is there? Sure. All right, saved prematurely there. So SVG replace, and all we have to do is pass in the document. Or what we're going to do is pass in the document, because I think I forgot. No, I changed it. Right, so we changed the HTML, looking for the camera, intro, and that's all seems to be working correctly. So what we do again, take our replace function, stringify it into our icons.js, and output it. Which would then mean that we can simply come into our main.ts file. Whoops. Get rid of all of that. Replace these with the ones in there, except it's not in there yet because I haven't run it. Now we can save this, and again, dash retro, let's make it 10x. And now we were back to where we were with importing the JavaScript from Fun Awesome itself, but in that case we were quickly able to get it down to like 800 something kilobytes to do this. And if we take a look here, what we're at is 10 kilobytes in JavaScript to be able to replace our icons. And I think in the next video, so most of the time I'm not, just writing HTML, right? Writing an application, in my case, currently using Vue typically. So we'll see how to do all of this in the context of a Vue app. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see that in the next video. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. I know that your time is valuable. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel and click the thumbs up button, as well as share the video with your friends. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below. And once again, thank you, and I will talk to you in the next video.